Cynthia, I think my mic is muted. Okay, good. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So this morning we have been talking about really what we've been talking about when we talk about coming home, I think is what we're really talking about is belonging. And where do we have a sense of belonging in ourselves, in our lives, in our hearts, in our souls? And I said this in a sermon a few months ago, but if you really think about it, nobody belongs everywhere, but everybody belongs somewhere. And so I want us to just, that's a very simple phrase, but I want us to take some time to really think about that. Nobody belongs everywhere, but everybody belongs somewhere. And I wonder sometimes if when we feel like we're hurt or we're suffering, is it possible that we have decided on some level that we need to belong in places where maybe we don't need to belong? And then we get hurt because we feel like we don't belong. But if nobody belongs everywhere, that means we individually don't necessarily belong everywhere. But, and we have to have this side of it too. Everybody, that means everybody in this room belongs somewhere. And sometimes the problem is that we get that mixed up and we start to think to ourselves, well, because I don't belong over here or over there, I just don't belong. I don't belong anywhere. When in fact, maybe we just haven't figured out exactly where we belong. We maybe haven't found our people yet. But if you think about it, that starts it starts when we're young. Even in kindergarten or elementary school, we resonate and we there are some children when we were little that we wanted to play with, and there were other kids that we just didn't necessarily want to play with. And then you grow up a little bit and you move to high school and you have what are called the cliques. And I know in my high school, our cliques, and this is, I'm very Generation X, but we had what we called the proud crowd. And we had the dockers, and those were the kids that felt like they probably didn't fit in, but they had each other. And they would go out. We had a big cement thing called the dock, and they would go outside and sit on the dock and they would smoke. And then we had the proud crowd. They were the dance team and the football team and the cheerleaders and all the people that we kind of felt like we weren't good enough for. And then we had, I guess I would have been considered sort of in that like normal group. I just like had a nice group of friends and we kind of didn't really fit anywhere, but we kind of got along with everybody. And that's just kind of the nature. That was the nature of high school, but that's the nature of the world we live in. We're not all going to belong everywhere. But I remember having a little aha moment even back in high school when I was kind of just thinking to myself like I didn't belong, like I was an outcast. But then I looked around and even some of the like most popular girls, I realized I see them in the bathroom crying. I see them not feeling like they belong too. And I realized I was like, oh, I don't think anybody totally has it together. Different people may appear that they have it put together in a way, but I don't think anybody totally has it together. And yet, I think what we have a tendency to do to ourselves is we have the expectation that we should have it all figured out. We should have it all put together. We should know where we belong and how we belong, and we should belong. And if we don't feel like we belong, then there's something wrong with us. But what if it's just that we haven't realized that we don't belong everywhere? We don't belong with everybody, and we don't have to. There are all types of psychological profiles. The Myers Briggs, we took all of those when I was in high school, the INFP, the introvert, extrovert, social, not social. And those psychological tests, they can help us to understand ourselves a little bit, but they're not the be all end all. But if you have realized that you're an introvert, you may be one of those people that realizes, I don't need tons of people around me. I need one or two people in my life. And those are my people. And when I'm with those people, it doesn't matter where I am, I'm going to be okay. And that's where I belong. It's not a place, but it's another few close people. If you're more of an extrovert, you may feel like, okay, I'm not good at the just kind of the one on one deep coffee conversations, but I walk into a UU church that is filled to the brim and my energy rises and I am thrilled and I feel like I belong because I love the energy of what's going on in this community. Does that make one person right? The one person that wants to be back there with coffee hour with their cup of coffee and knowing everybody versus the other person in this room, maybe more than one or two, that just can't wait for that introvert escape hatch to take us outside to the garden where you can have a coffee conversation maybe with one or two other people, and that's where you make that connection and that's how you feel like you belong. Belonging does not happen in only one way. And for me, when we talk about coming home, as Maya said with the children, it's not about do you have a place, a physical structure. Sometimes, yes, where you can go and feel safe. But sometimes it's less about that and more about that inner state of knowing that you are connected with beings or people around you. And I remember I grew up with dogs, but I never had cats because my mother always told me that she was allergic to cats. So I grew up without cats. Now it turns out they have come to visit many times and we have now have 5 cats and she does just fine. So I'm not sure about that, but I grew up without a cat. But when we first got married, we had this cat named Gizmo. And I didn't know very much about cats. And so I just was like, okay, you do you, and I'll do me. And I didn't realize until later what an incredible animal Gizmo was. Because at that early stage of our marriage, we were moving around a lot. And we had one little dog named Katie and we had a cat named Gizmo, and we got them because, and this is how we've gotten a few of our animals, which is very strange to me, that Cameron would call and say, one of my coworkers, they just moved into a new house and the owners moved out and left their animals. That's how we've gotten 2 of our dogs. And that's how we got Gizmo and Katie. And I knew how to take care of a dog, so, but I didn't know how to take care of a cat. And so we had dog doors. And like I said, we were moving a lot. But here's what Gizmo did. Every time we moved, he was not connected at all to a place. We would move and he would go out the dog door or go out the window. He would establish his perimeter and then he'd come home. And this was his new place. And then we would go someplace else and he would do that. And we stayed with my parents and he went right out their dog door, explored, came back. And what I realized, at least for this cat, he didn't care about location. We were his family, we were his home. And so wherever we were, he was going to stick around. And I learned later, you know, that not all cats do that, right? Like you move and a cat gets out and it freaks out and off it goes and you don't see it again for a while because it's scared and it's hiding. I just thought that that's what cats did because that's what Gizmo did. But I realized no, he had just established what his home base was. And his home base was his people. And it didn't matter whether we were living in Littleton or Rifle or Loma or Grand Junction. He went all those places with us, and never once did we ever worry about losing him because he made us his home. And so, my invitation for us today is to think about that. Where is that safe place? Where is that home base? And it might be a location, or it might not. It might be people, but not all the time. You know, we have people who are very, very connected to animals. And their home base, like Gizmo was connected to us. There are some people in this valley that their home base is their animals. We have other people that may have human connections, but unless they are out hiking, connected to nature with the trees in the mountains, they don't feel like they're home. And then there are other people who can't live in the mountains because they need to be by the ocean. If they're not by the water and they're not feeling that back and forth of the tides, they don't feel like they're home. And so it's not, and it's never a one size fits all for everybody, but everybody belongs somewhere. I saw a few years ago on Facebook, and I've shared this a few times, but I love it. There was this Facebook post about Eeyore, and it said one awesome thing about Eeyore is that even though he is basically clinically depressed, he still gets invited to participate in shenanigans and adventures with all of his friends. And they never expect him to pretend to feel happy. They just love him anyway, and they never leave him behind or ask him to change. Isn't that true belonging? They just let him be who he needs to be, where he needs to be. They don't ask him to change. They just let him be who he is. And so that's what I invite us to think about today. Where are the areas where we do belong? There was a story that was told at one of our UU General Assemblies years ago, and the keynote speaker who had become a Unitarian Universalist minister, talked about how when he was a teenager, because he came out as gay, he had been rejected and he had been kicked out of his home. And he was basically told by his family of origin that he didn't belong. And he had been raised in a more conservative religious setting, and that faith tradition also told him that he didn't belong. And he talks about one day, and this was in Seattle, he was just walking, and he was wondering, if he belonged anywhere. And he said he turned around the corner and he saw this big building, and it had a huge rainbow flag. And it was a sign, it was a symbol to him. He was like, oh my gosh, these people, this building right here is telling me I belong. Is it possible that I might belong somewhere just as I am? And what a beautiful experience, but what a sad experience if you think about it. That you have to ask yourself the question, is it possible that I just might belong here? Because how many of us have told ourselves that we don't belong anywhere? And if you have told yourself that in the past, or you are telling yourself that now, I want you to rethink that. Because everybody belongs somewhere. And if you haven't found that place where you belong yet, it just means you haven't found it yet. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It doesn't mean that we aren't here. And so I invite us to think about, with gratitude for Cynthia and Chelsea today, what it means to come home and what it means to recollect and reconnect those parts of ourselves, those parts of our souls that have gone missing. And for some of us, maybe some of those aspects of us went missing so long ago that we don't even miss them anymore. But that doesn't mean there aren't empty spaces inside us without them. And so, is it time? Is it possible to gently and compassionately and lovingly begin to bring those sort of wounded parts, those parts of us that are hiding? Is it possible? Is it time to start gently inviting them home? And listen to the language that I'm using. Gently, lovingly, compassionately, slowly, inviting. It doesn't have to happen overnight. It doesn't have to be rushed. It doesn't have to be harsh. It is an invitation. It is an invitation to start thinking about what in my life, what in the deepest inner part of me has gone missing. And how do I bring it home? Maybe, maybe we realize I haven't laughed in a while. That's a question. When was the last time all of you laughed? And if it's been a while since you've actually genuinely laughed, maybe think about that. I remember when I was going through seminary and everything was very heady and intellectual, I realized that I hadn't listened to music in about 6 months. And I used to always listen to music. And I realized I've sent the music out of my life. What is going on? It's time for that music to come home. So that's my invitation. What are the areas of your life that you felt like were wounded in a way that you just had to bury them? And is it okay to gently, lovingly begin to bring them back? Do you have joy in your life? Do you have laughter in your life? Do you have music in your life? And if not, start small. Remember that favorite song that you had when you were a child and listen to it. Remember that favorite song that you had as a teenager and listen to it. Think about something that made you laugh so hard when you were young, and maybe it'll make you laugh again. It's okay to bring all aspects of ourselves into our lives. We can be serious. These are serious times. We can be intentional. We can be advocates, but we also have to bring the joy and the laughter and the love and the compassion into who we are. And then we get to go express that as a whole person out in the world. So, just a little bit to think about. Where do you belong? If you don't feel like you belong, you know that you do belong. You maybe just haven't found it yet. When was the last time you laughed? What is your favorite music? And when was the last time that you just looked at somebody with a genuine, loving smile and said, welcome? It's that easy to help somebody feel like they belong. And so, with that, let us sing together Lean on Me, number 1021.